Qualys has brought together vulnerability management and patch management, letting security teams discover vulnerabilities and apply patches immediately, all within a single, unified app. Sign up for a free trial of Qualys VMDR, vulnerability management, detection, and response today at securityweekly.com/Qualys. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. Join us tomorrow, December 2nd, to see what's under the XDR hood. Visit securityweekly.com/webcast. Save your seat. Don't forget to check out our entire library of on-demand webcasts by visiting securityweekly.com/on-demand. And now, Mr. Joff Thayer has joined us for the news. Joff, welcome to the show.
Hey, good to see you, everybody. It's lovely to be here.
Yes, nice to have you here this evening, Joff, where I want to start with hacking printers. Did you guys read this?
Hacking printers.
Did you see this research?
Before you start with hacking printers, can I do a shameless promotion?
Oh, yeah. Let's do your shameless plug before. Now we've teased it up that we're going to talk about hacking printers. But before that, Joff has an announcement.
I do. I have an announcement. Do you want to learn regular expressions? Because if you do...
Do you ever truly learn regular expressions, or do you experience regular expressions?
Okay. Do you want to experience regular expressions? Because if you do, I'm doing a 4-hour thing this December I have to think about that. 14th. There we go. The December the 14th. It's a Tuesday. 4 hours, 9 a.m., pay what you can, minimum $25. You can't afford not to do this.
That's true. That's a great way to market the class. And check out part 2, irregular expressions. Oh, yeah. That'll be held in January.
Mm-hmm. Okay, wait a minute. We got a problem here. Because in the first segment, we had COBOL books. Now we have regular expressions. I'm like, are we going back to the 70s here? What's going on?
It's all still in use today, my friend.
That's the scary thing. You're right. It is.
It is.
Well, I mean, regular expressions and COBOL are two scary things.
You need to know regular expressions. I don't know about COBOL, but
if you know COBOL, you're going to be in
regular expressions. I'm just going to say regular expressions are timeless.
Yeah.
They indeed are timeless. I mean, the mathematical language for regular expressions was literally defined in the 50s, and we are still using it today.
Does it really date back that far? I didn't know that.
It does.
That
was when they first laid all that stuff down.
That's awesome.
A bunch of people in white button-down shirts and black ties and black horn-rimmed glasses were all sitting around going, what should we call these? I don't know. Regular expressions?
I thought those were the people that created the internet at BBN. They're in the white shirts.
No, they did all of that. Yeah, so
they did that too.
The same bunch. Yeah, it was just like, what should we do tomorrow?
They were just younger in the 50s.
Yeah, exactly.
They were just younger in the 50s? Oh, wow.
That's awesome.
No, we weren't. 1951, to be precise. There was a mathematical notation called regular events.
There you go.
Stephen Cole Clean.
Regev just didn't catch on.
Right?
Regev.
They didn't go for all that hipster stuff back then, Jeff.
No.
It was all much more, all the hep cats might have said that, but.
You ready to talk about hacking printers now?
Okay.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Let's go back.
Print
we don't have Boris
shells.
On the show.
Critical bugs impacting 150 HP printer models. Did anyone happen to... So this
is this the font? Is this the font one?
This is the font one.
Yep. It's a buffer overflow font.
Well, I have to give the researchers from F-Secure mad props. Is that still what we say? I give them unscrupulous credit.
In 1951.
Yeah. But so their research paper, which I linked to in the show notes, was just amazing. Because they didn't just cut right to the chase and be like, all right, here's the dumps from IDA and here's how I reverse engineered it. They were like, no. Here's pictures of the board and all the headers that we use to collect all to get. Well, it's Windows CE. What was amazing to me, back up a moment, was there's multiple what we call IoT devices, but multiple embedded systems on the printer.
Yep.
One was Linux based on scanning. One was a real-time operating system for print. Was it printing? Was the other?
It's for printing.
Yeah, for printing.
It's for print port connection and communication.
Right. And there was a whole flow diagram of everything. Like they broke it all out. So I'm like, this is like multiple IoT devices. I guess hence the name multifunction printer. You think there's just like one operating system under the hood. No, there's multiple controllers. So soldering onto the different headers on the multifunction printer gave them access to one was like the EFI, one was the Linux operating system for scanning, one was the real-time operating system for printing, and how they kind of reverse engineered, like, what do we want to do? One of them was Windows CE. Which one?
Which is not, like, that's actually much more common, the Windows CE or even Windows 7, Windows 10, built into something like the Xerox, where they're running a Fiery server, which is a computer that sits behind the multifunction printer that handles, staple jobs, folding, multiple user accounts, web GUI and UI that gets displayed to the the big Xerox front end, on top of the other 2 or 3 that you end up having for scanning and or printing. So yeah, Windows
CE drove the actual display of physically attached to the printer. And they realized if they killed one service, they got to the desktop on Windows CE, which I thought was really cool.
To be fair,
which is not just HP. Like we'll give these guys some credit because they just looked at HP, but we've done this on Ryuk, we've done this on Sharp, we've done this on Xerox. They all have the same exact vulnerability.
To be fair,
here's the fun part.
Hold on, Jeff, then Joff.
I mean, we hear stuff like this. If you're thinking, wow, it's an old, outdated operating system, I just want to clarify, these are embedded operating systems very often, and they have much longer life expectancies, service terms than the traditional Windows operating systems. I might know that because I've had to deal with them in the recent past.
Well, these are brand new systems. Will have these right up. In fact, we just got a new Xerox. That's why I've been looking at this. The brand new ones will have the exact same configuration as the old ones, unless you're paying a substantial amount of money for something like Windows 10 or Windows 19 Core. The embedded operating system is almost certainly Windows CE or Windows 7.
Now, the problem I'll add is that these embedded operating systems very often are not hardened, shall we say, which is why we're having this conversation. Go ahead, Joff.
Oh, so I was just going to say, because of my past history, I guarantee you there are hundreds, if not thousands, of these devices that are vulnerable, directly accessible on the internet because universities. The end.
Shodan. So that was my note in there. Shodan port 9100. So this vulnerability, from what I gathered from the technical documentation, was they discovered. I mean, just reading through it, there was some vulnerabilities in there. Like, in order to dump into the EFI and other aspects of these various operating systems that are under the hood, like none of which were ever prompted for a password or any kind of authentication or validation. Which that in and of itself is very concerning. But
that's basic hardware level hacking, though, right? Some of this is with physical access. So some of their vulnerabilities is around physical access.
But the font one was over 9100.
Font one's on 9100.
Yeah. And so what's Shodan tell us about 9100?
It's raw.
Well, no, like how many are exposed?
3,916.
Oh, yeah, they're just a few.
Yeah, that's it.
Did I say thousands? Told you.
What I wanted to add to this discussion, to sort of tack on to our previous segment where we were talking about risk and sort of having to weigh the, make a risk-based decision. My first thought is, what are people printing these days? Because, the beginning of the article says, what's at risk is what's basically could be printed on the printer, what's in the cache, what's in the memory. And I'm like,
everything is printed still. Like, you look at a bank,
law firms,
a title company. Law firms are notorious. They have to print every document. If it's not on paper, it doesn't exist. Even with the sophisticated software that's electronically storing these, they keep physical copies for that.
Yep.
Title companies, mortgage companies, all of those are still all physically printed. You go to any bank, those are all still physically printed.
Well, I used to work with this a long time ago. I worked with a lot of this because we had a lot of students who wanted to become programmers for, in particular, HP. And a lot of these devices are cobbled together out of things, as you see. And it was because they kept adding to them over time. So they have something that works, and they say, well, we need to add this function. So they don't want to redevelop the whole thing. They just bolt on another chip, and they put another system on there. That's why you get all this sort of like mix and match sort of stuff. And the other problem with printers is that they're treated like these devices that are not threats, because they sit there forever and ever. They were just, they were hardwired. They weren't things that were exposed to the internet, but they've slowly become exposed. But people still think of them as these sort of isolated things. It's like a mixer that's sitting in your kitchen. You don't think about that being exposed to the internet, even though it may well be at this point.
Oh, fuck me. I did the search wrong. I noticed it and I fixed it. 1.2 million.
Oh, there we go. That's more like it.
How did you fix your search?
I added the quote mark.
Oh, gotcha.
That's why they pay him the big bucks. By the way,
bucks.
Regular expression there.
Now wait, 9100 is Jet Direct.
It is Jet Direct,
and that protocol has existed for
ever
a really long time.
I mean, from the time when they actually made a card called a Jet Direct card that you could put. You could buy a Jet Direct card to put in your machine that would actually allow that connection to go to like an HP printer. HP made those cards. Yeah.
Like, I wonder how little that protocol has changed.
I bet not much.
Meaning that most drivers today that are largely now network based are just implementing the same code, and like, it just prints.
Yeah.
So why do I need to like
if
update?
It ain't broke, don't fix it.
Why do I need to update my printer or firmware or software if the functionality, or my printer in general, if the functionality it provides is when I click print, I get a document on the printer. I get a physical piece of paper with my printout on it.
And LPG is still
I know a lot of companies, when the pandemic started and they sent everybody home, they started opening port 9100 so people could print because they had to be at home. I could point you to some people I actually know who were doing this because their company said, well, we're trying to figure out a way to get this in there through the VPNs, but it didn't work. And so they literally just opened port 9100s and told people.
What, I got to drive in the office to get my printout?
Well, the printouts weren't coming for the person who's printing them. They were printing them for people that were at the office or they were being filed. So they had people in the office who were collecting the printouts and then cataloging them all and putting them in the files. So they opened these print ports so people could dump print jobs when they finished with their work, because a lot of positions, like Tyler said, a lot of positions got to that point where they needed to do the finished product, and they would print it or they would scan it and send it to the printer at work, and it gets printed out, that triplicate copy or whatever they got to file. And they were just opening that port up. That's why you see all those showdown ports too, because a lot of people just went, I don't know how to get this to work, but nobody's able to do anything. Just open the port. It'll be fine. How many nerds could there be who know what port 9100 is? Come on.
Anybody who's ever worked in IT support over the past 2 decades?
Now I want to go find my list of Qualys ports and see if it's on there.
It's on there.
What I also thought was interesting was that it says the scanner board communicates with the communication board using a normal network. The printer board uses a Canbus to interact with the formatter, making the architecture of the multifunction printer similar to vehicles.
What? They use Canbus?
They use Canbus.
I didn't know that. That's nuts. Oh, by the way, this is completely unrelated, but Doug, hold up your glass because it looks a lot like this one.
There you go.
Oh, my God. Except mine's got no print.
Oh, God.
Okay, back to the squirrel shiny object.
The reason, I had this explained to me, the reason they use Canbus is because a multifunction printer is actually the scanner and the fax and the printer and the copier, and they're effectively different machines.
That's what I mean. They cobbled all that stuff together when they started making the multifunction printers because they had a printer that works.
Yeah.
And they go, well, that part works. Why do we want to redevelop the wheel? Because Jet Direct works or whatever. So let's add a scanner on there. Oh, here's this Linux system we can use to make a scanner. We'll just bolt that on, and we got to connect those things together somehow. So, hey, Canbus works. Let's do it.
So wait,
it was Canbus or Modbus?
You're telling me that my Tesla is actually a souped-up printer on wheels?
Pretty much, yeah.
Pretty much.
If you just find the right combination of keys on the little panel there, you can scan and print while you're driving. It's awesome.
Well, we don't see new printer protocols being introduced, right? Because then everyone would have to generate a new driver for every operating system, whereas IPP, LPR, JetDirect, all those
That's
things.
why automated driver installs.
Windows has the driver ecosystem like nailed down. So on the Microsoft side, that would not be difficult.
Well, and because like Tyler's saying, doesn't Windows automatically install those drivers for you?
Yeah.
Is that what you're referring to?
They're built in.
Yeah.
Which is sometimes
inherent drivers.
Yeah, I mean that's why is because printing was such a critical aspect of business that Microsoft nailed that down in Windows XP days, so that there wasn't an issue. Those drivers automatically installed, and thus printer protocols have not changed at all because printer driver manufacturers don't want to re-engineer all that.
And you think you don't use a
back up
printer,
step, guys? Printers haven't changed.
Print spooler.
Printers haven't changed. Do you know that the brother bought the rights to the old HP printers? If you buy a new Brother LaserJet, it's an old HP 4, the little square boxes, and they're like $80 now, and you can still use the HP cartridges, I think. And they're fantastic. A little flimsier than the old HPs, but they're fantastic. And if you want a laser printer that will never die, buy an old HP 4SI.
LaserJet 4 will never die. I know where one's sitting. I know where one's sitting right now that was bought new, and I guarantee you it will still work. It's sitting in a house that someone died in, and I know where the printer is right now.
That's funny because it's funny that Josh says that because I've got a Brother printer, and it is literally an HP LaserJet 4.
It's the same thing.
It's reliable as a truck.
Because it works, and why change it? I mean, it's a simple task.
You think you don't need a printer at home until your kids need to do a book report or something, and they need to print out pictures and cut them out.
I had to buy. I had just bought a house, and it was like, "Can you print this and fax it to me?" And I was like, "What?
What?
What were those words you just said?" And of course, I called out my wife. She's an accountant, and I was like, "You can print, right?" She was like, "Of course I can. Where would you like me to print it? Here at work? Across the." And I was like, "Can you fax too?" And she was like, "Of course."
Fax? Still fax?
Oh hell
fax,
yeah!
medical
faxing, baby.
Medical. Thank you, Tyler. Take it.
Medical relies on fax. They will not. In fact, they consider fax the only secure transmission out of a medical facility for most of these small docs.
Don't laugh too hard, Tyler. Depressing. Come on.
We just saw.
You don't know what the damn fax is going to. Like, what the shit?
I just saw a request. They said I had, in order to get a confirmation of employment for this loan, I had to fax a request, and I was like, "Can I just email the request?" And they were like, "No, we only accept fax. That's the only thing that's secure." That's literally what they said. I said,
"How do you fax it if you don't have a fax machine now? Is there e-fax?"
You use a fax.
That's how I did it. I printed to an electronic fax service that then faxed it to them. So I'm like, I was like, this is about as secure as me just writing it on. Yeah,
that was my point. How is that? Secure.
It's not. I'm like, I could put it on a pigeon and send it. It would be better. But
it's like I could send it to you digitally, or I could send it to you digitally to a third party
in China.
It's gonna receive it digitally and then fax it to you where you're gonna print it out.
Yeah,
in clear text.
And yeah.
In clear text,
services a market.
There isn't that encrypted fax protocol? Is there?
No. Well, I don't know if there is, but they don't use it. And then guess what the fax is going to do? It's going to scroll out of that machine and lay in a tray in an open office for like 3 days until somebody goes and picks them up.
A fax machine is just a printer over a phone line.
Yeah, if you got that phone number right, it'll lay in that office.
Well, yeah, if you don't accidentally fax it to Tyler or something, who's got a whole bank of fax machines just waiting for action.
That data probably went voice over IP at some point.
Accidentally fax it to Tyler.
Yeah, exactly. Quick story, I used to work at a paintball store, and we were in the basement beneath a restaurant, and we had a fax machine. And that's how we would fax like orders and stuff back and forth between our suppliers and such. And I would get faxes. And like also when I get faxes, like there'd be these weird artifacts, like little round things and like little lines coming off. I'm like, what is going on with our fax machine? Maybe a hacker,
fax porn,
the techno nerd. No, I took apart the fax machine and it was infested with cockroaches.
Does that mean it had bugs?
It had bugs. There was literally bugs in the fax. Like you could put your ear up to it and kind of hear.
Where's Grace Hopper when you need her?
Those bugs.
Speaking of COBOL, where's Grace Hopper when you need her?
Right. Anyway, so make sure you go read the net-secure.com is the way. There's a link to it in the. It's an amazing. They did an amazing job of describing one of the best research reports.
It was one of my favorite stories of the week. I was reading
detailed.
it. Yeah, it was
the
awesome.
detail they put in this report was absolutely amazing,
and it made me think a whole lot about printers and faxing and all this stuff that we used to do that people still do like crazy. And I hadn't thought about it in a long time until I bought a house, and there was people were saying, "Can you print this out and sign it?" And I was like, "What? No, can I just email it?"
It used to be that I had to print tickets to stuff.
Oh yeah.
And now, anytime I go to, we went to a soccer game, movie theater, right? Like, there's all these kind of scenarios where, like, if you're going somewhere and require a ticket, that would be the use case where I had to use my printer. Now I'm just like, I'm on like the Showcase app, and there's a QR code, and even if I buy 5 tickets, they scan one QR code and it's totally done. I just gotta remember to bring my phone to the movie theater, but now, so I don't need to print. Really, until, like I said, my kids need to do a book report.
I actually dumped the last job off that printer that was in my friend's house that died, and I said, I'm just going to see what the last print job on this printer was. It was an airplane ticket boarding pass from 2006 that belonged to me. I was like, this is the last thing that was printed here. It's been sitting here for 15 years. Like, well, it's still there by Northwest Airlines.
Oh, that's funny.
That's fantastic.
We can talk about Zoom. Some Zoom. We haven't talked about Zoom in a while.
No.
Friends don't let friends use Zoom.
So is that the case? I mean, when the pandemic was like breaking out in its peak, right? In March, April, May 2020, Zoom was like in the headlines. Everyone was like rushing to Zoom. There was all this hoopla about Zoom. Now I feel like, we're a year more later. We're not so much focused on Zoom. Like, we've all kind of settled on our technologies that
but
work.
It's a verb.
It's a verb
now.
Oh,
like
yeah,
Google, I get
Google,
all the time. People say, "Is that a Zoom meeting?" And I'm like, "Well, it's not a Zoom meeting." And they're like, "Well, yeah, I know, but whatever." It's like
it became the vernacular people use, whether it's a Google Meet or Teams meeting.
And every time somebody says that, Bill Gates, that's a tick.
Ring Central. What else? Jitsi. Jitsi's the open source one.
What's Cisco WebEx?
GoToMeeting.
GoToMeeting.
Blue Jeans.
Blue Jeans. Haven't heard of Blue Jeans before.
Chime.
Ooh, yeah.
Slack and Discord. Slack and Discord.
Twitch. All of them can be used for those now.
Right. It's it's interesting. And Zoom came under obviously under fire for a lot of the vulnerabilities that they had, but like a year and a half or so, almost 2 years later, Zoom really, I think, stepped up to the plate. I don't think they did a bad job in their response, by the way. I think it was they were a company that all of a sudden there was this gigantic spotlight on them. And we've seen lots of companies deal with security vulnerabilities. On a ranking scale, Zoom didn't do that bad, folks. No. Right? Like, Zoom did fine.
And they were like a startup that went from 10 customers to 10 billion customers in like 2 weeks. And so they really weren't prepared for what happened.
I'm not one to be knocking Zoom in any stretch. So, and I think the recent articles that I've seen about them really kind of backs this up, in that they've released auto update features for Windows and Mac clients, which I think is important. I mean, obviously a lot of apps have the auto update feature to varying degrees, right? Sometimes auto update is like, I won't let you start that app until you go to our website and download the new version, which maybe that's an update feature, not an auto update feature, but still, I think better than leaving it up to the user as to when they're actually going to update it. Browsers went through this transformation in now Zoom. What I think is, also before that, they did true end-to-end encryption, followed by two-factor authentication. Now automatic updates for Mac and Windows, but not support for Linux clients for me and that other person who's using it on Linux. That was my joke.
You just need to use it through Firefox.
It's so funny.
Lead up to my joke. Yeah. Okay, moving right along.
Well, you prompted me to stop my Zoom client to see if it would prompt me for an update.
Oh.
Well, so you probably have to manually update to get to the version that auto updates.
I think you did have to do that, because I do use Zoom because it was the official platform for the school.
Even on Linux, though, it wouldn't auto update, but it would tell me that there was an update, and it would be very prominent not very prominent, but you could see it in the internet, like, hey, there's an update. Like, cool, I'll go apt update and
actually, I'm manually updating my Zoom client, and the new update available includes automatic updates.
Yeah.
Right. So you're absolutely correct.
So I mean, if you're an organization that Zoom is your platform, obviously update to get auto updates,
right?
Because I think it's as prominent as a browser.
It is
today for many organizations. They also fixed some vulnerabilities. They patched 2 vulnerabilities in Zoom, and blah blah blah. I don't know how critical these vulnerabilities were. But for overflow to lead to crash the service or potentially execute arbitrary code. Another one was allowed for exposure of the state process in memory, could gain insight into arbitrary areas of product memory. I would read that as maybe pull credentials depending. But
a lot of the things that they're fixing now are more like what you'd expect. They're very esoteric kind of things.
Yeah.
And before, they were having to fix things that were just like, wow, I cannot believe this hole is here. And they really locked that thing down over. I mean, I was watching it because, like I said, we used it all the time. And I was watching it as it got locked down. And it was like, well, we're taking this feature out and we're putting, you have to enable this and all this stuff that was just turned on.
I tell you what, that company and that team has been busy in the past, almost 2 years for sure.
They have, and now they're a verb.
Interesting.
What's that?
I said your number 12 is interesting.
76 security tools is the average that companies have to manage,
and counting is amazing because that's number 11.
But there's only 12 PCI requirements.
11. Oh, sorry, that was you said 12. I thought I read that wrong, Tyler.
We can start with that one.
That's a good one. 76 security tools is way too bloody many.
Yeah, that's a small number.
I think what I've observed in the security market is great. I mean, great consolidation in that there's been a lot of acquisitions. In fact, if you're tracking companies that myself and Matt Alderman have been advising, like a lot of them, actually now all but one have been acquired. And I kind of don't I want to attribute that to Matt and I's great advice and all that stuff, but I think that maybe is a very, very, very small reason why these companies were acquired. It's the hard work and perseverance of the folks that work there, but also I think where the market is going, right, is that new technology and innovation is happening in startups that is stuff that is really valuable, so much so that they're being acquired. And I also think it's the consolidation, to this article's point, of companies that don't want to manage 76 damn security products. They want to manage a lot less. And so this consolidation is inherent. Tyler, sorry.
Well, I mean, let's be clear.
I think it's important.
Hold on, Tyler, then Josh.
I'm curious what your thoughts are around that, because I agree. It is nice to get everything consolidated, get that single pane of glass. That's all vendors, unicorns' desire is to fit underneath that. But with so many companies doing the acquisitions and the big players purchasing rather than building, those bolt-on add-ins to products and trying to make things fit into existing products, the code bases, the teams, the management, all of those things. Is this actually a good thing? Well, I think the fundamental idea is great. Let's get this all under less security tools, single pane of glass. But are they burying some of these? Are they putting less priority because they're bolting on, 10 tools? Are some of these tools less efficient because they're bolting them on to existing product lines? What is your idea around that?
It depends. I think there's multiple buckets this fits in, Tyler. I think there are sometimes where acquisitions can just either go horribly wrong or just take a really long time to pan out. It's kind of one category where the smaller company gets swallowed up by this gigantic company, and they kind of what happened to some of those products that I loved. Javelin Networks I'll use as an example. I mean, they were integrated with Symantec, but not to their fault or Symantec's fault really. Symantec underwent a whole ton of changes that impacted that acquisition. So there's some great technology that maybe right now, like, we're not seeing bubble to the surface, but over time, certainly, I would see that coming back. But it's because there's like all kinds of other changes happening, right? And those are kind of like the worst scenarios. I think maybe even before that, because I do have hope for those types of scenarios. But we can go back to some of the Cisco acquisitions, and
I was going to say FireEye and McAfee. Wasn't that a real recent one?
What was the other company where they would acquire companies and that's where they would go to die? What is
IBM?
IBM. But what was the other? There was another one.
Network Associates.
Network Associates. Thank you, Jeff. Jeff 500 for Jeff, right? That was one where like companies would go to die. I still think that happens today. Cisco turned it around, I think, because they got SourceFire and they got Duo and many others that they've turned it around, right? So that's one end of the spectrum. And then I think
Cisco is still not considered a security company by many, but keep going.
No, but they've got a good security portfolio today. And they've worked hard, and it's taken time to develop that. And then I also think, Tyler, there's ones that, now we start going into like the really successful acquisition kind of end of things, right? There's ones that do take like some time, but not years, and they get integrated. And there's some that are just like, an instant win and off to the races. Elastic is doing a great job, with their acquisitions and Endgame and integrating all that. Yeah.
That's actually a good one.
Yeah. So it's a spectrum.
So let me throw some ideas at you about this, because I the number 76 bothers me, because I think it doesn't have context.
Yeah, what's a security product? First of all,
that's one thing. Is what of those products are actually run by the IT group, the system administration group, the compliance group, whatever, and might be used by security, which is great because that way you're not buying it twice. How many of those products are shelfware? How many of those products are on automatic? How many of those products are used for one thing that happens once a year when the auditor shows up?
I think but to Jeff's point, like, how many of them are like legit tools? Like, maybe you've got an internal pen test team and you've gone and purchased 3 or 4. Like, I can think of 3 or 4 products that I would buy as a internal pen test team, right? Like, you're buying Burp Suite, you might be buying Cobalt Strike, you might be buying Plex Track, right? That's a great one. Breach and attack simulation. What's Bryson's Scythe? You might be buying Scythe.
You might be buying a couple of vulnerabilities.
But see, I wouldn't count
so
those.
Like on your internal pen test team, you might have 3 or 4 like base tools.
I wouldn't count that as management, though. I mean, those are tools. So yeah, right. So those are tools.
To Josh's point, though, like, what are they counting as a?
Well, yeah, because I mean, what on earth could you have with 76 different tools? I mean, that's insane.
Well, then there's also things you don't even manage. How about Bugcrowd with Casey Ellis, you interviewed today? A Bugcrowd is a security tool running the bug bounty program, but it's not something you deal with on a every minute basis.
Right. Yeah. It's not. Yeah. Exactly. They're helping you manage that the program, right? It is a tool, but
yeah, you look at EDR, you look at SIM, you look at XDR, you look at AV, you look at your vulnerability management, you look at your configuration management.
What is Microsoft calling their tools for configuration and
Defender, ATP, Defender? Just put Defender in front of anything.
Is it not?
Microsoft
what is their patching? What are they calling their patching now?
SCCM.
Is it still SCCM?
It's still SCCM.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's the one thing that hasn't gotten like the O365 Defender ATP cloud.
Coming soon to a name change near you.
Meta.
It's going to be.
I feel like I need a drink several times after
Defender for systems management or something. So many acronyms. We could have a Twitter poll or contest, like rename SCCM for Microsoft.
Oh my gosh!
So I actually downloaded the report. I'm trying to skim through it right now because I had the same sort of knee-jerk reaction to the 76 that I think everybody else is having, and I was at least looking for like categories. But I know I've got.
I thought that was low.
In some of my slide decks, I've got diagrams of like all the disciplines that go into cybersecurity that CISOs have to cover, and they're easily 76, if not more, disciplines. So yeah, they're probably being very loose. I mean, there is no detail that I can see in the report. They probably are being very loose in what they define as a security tool. But I could easily, I mean, again, I see everything through the lens of PCI. 12 major requirements, 350-ish some controls. Half of them are for documentation, but that leaves you 175 things that you're supposed to be doing, where most of the time you're going to use some sort of a tool of some sort.
Right. And, I mean, also think about your DevOps cycle and your SDLC today, and how many tools you could be using that also speak to security. Right? You got your static analysis, you got your IDE linting tool, you got your SCA, you got your unit testing kind of fuzzing tool, you got your DAS scanner, like the list goes on. So
I think you're in the 200s, honestly.
But the only thing I can see, and again, I'm just skimming through this. It's a 16-page report. They do have some mention that they're filtering their findings to larger clients, enterprises, and larger enterprises do tend to buy one of everything. They might have all three of the major scan engines. That type of thing might boost the number. It would be nice if they'd at least would have categorized what they're talking about in terms of the types of security tools, if not provide, God forbid, a definition of what they mean by their term.
Yeah, I mean, so, you take 5 to 10 in each of those categories, like SIM. There's at least 10 SIMs.
Yeah.
Call EDR another 10. XDR, there's another 5 to 10. You look at network layer or next gen firewall or AV, like there's another 10. Like I think you could be in the multiple hundreds within a couple of minutes pretty quickly, and that is what we see in enterprises. Like you get these tools that integrate.
I don't think this is a bad thing to highlight in a survey like that. I mean, we typically pick on surveys, right? And this survey was sponsored by Panacea. Panacea is a company that's marketing on measuring and understanding your security performance with continuous controls monitoring. So I think
like
they have
Panacea and Pancreas, like Panacea.
Something like, I have met with the Panacea team, right? Like, I mean, they're a great group of people that I think are working to, provide a valuable solution. And I don't think the problem they're trying to solve is necessarily one that we don't agree with, right? We agree we have too many tools, and how do you measure the effectiveness of all those tools and the effectiveness of your program? So, if they're helping customers with that and they're using this to raise awareness on that, I think it's something that we do need to raise awareness about.
And that doesn't even count the MSPs and tool integration, right?
Oh yeah,
like that's another entire different issue that you run into as a large organization. What's your MSP using? What are they forcing you to use? What are you integrating into your stack for the MSP in order to get visibility for you and the SOC? And outside of your tool stack, where do those go, and who's watching?
I have tool and platform fatigue, like big time. I mean, we're like 70 people. Right. And we acquired 4 companies. And so you can just imagine like how hard it is to, one, just know what everyone's got and then start to consolidate that is a monumental effort.
And that's the other problem. If you acquire 4 companies, you acquire 4 entirely different tech stacks.
Mm-hmm.
And so you might have,
you don't.
Dimitri
You
was
throw
asking,
away
no same companies running all 10 SIMs. And it's like, there might be.
Yeah, but throwing stuff away, Jeff, can take...
If your acquisition strategy is to leave them autonomous, they might be running all 10 different SIMs.
Yeah, you either leave them autonomous or you start to consolidate them. But I can speak firsthand. Sometimes that can take it can take a month or two, or that can take a year or more to consolidate those platforms. Yeah.
Agreed. But you mentioned Network Associates is notorious. Even Cisco back in the day. Computer Associates, are they even still around?
They
are.
CA was one of them that they would some of the early security pure play companies, security tool vendor companies, they were acquired by these companies usually to get to the technology. They all had consulting arms, let's say, and most of the people that I knew that worked for these companies, with some exceptions, few exceptions, were lost, because they either acquired the technology to eliminate the competition, or they, wanted to expand their portfolio. but they bought the company for one specific thing, and the rest of it was just kind of just make it go away. I'm sure that doesn't happen anymore.
And don't forget, just like the printers, there was a lot of tools that contain other tools. So you may be counting all those tools as well, because they may be very independent things that are embedded in tools. And it's just like, I've seen this in firewalls where they've got like a tool suite that's embedded inside the firewall. So you may have, multiple stacks of tools in any given other tool.
And lots of overlap. That's the other thing that didn't come up here. There's a tremendous amount of overlap in this space. And I'm not sure the people acquiring really care. It's like, okay, here's some tools, especially in the large enterprise. They're like, well, if there's overlap, there's overlap.
Yeah.
Whatever.
So I'm going to make a hypothesis. We're beating this dead horse to death.
We are. Because Tyler really wanted to talk about my story number 12.
We'll get to that in a minute. So, give me the last word on this thing. The crux of the report, Panacea, is we can consolidate everything into the single pane of glass, as Tyler mentioned. So my assumption is they are referring to security tools that produce some sort of events, logs, output, something that they can absorb and produce some sort of graphic for. So they might be including event logs, sys logs, any technology that's deployed on any system, regardless of what its function is. But if it produces logs or events, they're sucking it in. Maybe that's the way they're coming up with this 76 number. There's at least the implication it's something that they can absorb into their platform.
Tyler, tell us about the installer vulnerability. Cisco Talos has just been, talk about Cisco, Talos has been on a tear. Mm-hmm. Like their research team is amazing.
Yep.
This was my story number 12, Tyler.
Oh, this was your 12. Okay.
Yeah.
No, this goes back to one of the CVEs that was released earlier in the year. I think it was 41379. That's what it was. Which was it has to do with MSI installers and the ability for attackers to use MSI installer to get higher privileges as part of the installation package.
What were they executing as part of the installer? I read this.
An MSI pack.
Ago. Yeah, but inside the MSI pack, they were using something to get execution at a higher privilege level. What was there a specific binary?
It's the it's a DACL. It's a DACL for Microsoft Edge. It's one of the Edge services.
Yeah. Okay.
So Edge allows the elevation of a service.
What's a DACL? DACL
is a discretionary access control list. It's kind of like an ACL, but it's utilizing the discretionary.
It's like an ACL, but it's discretionary.
Correct.
Who or what's discretion? Is there
it allows the packages to be executed as a system.
Is there an if-then statement?
There probably is, as part of the proof of concept, like looking through how he's doing the new proof of concept. So basically they applied a patch, 2021-4379 was patched back in, I think, November. That patch is now being bypassed through the proof of concept that's leveraging actually a better proof of concept where it's calling the elevation service in order to get access to either a file or execute an MSI package.
Yeah.
And so you can abuse this in a lot of ways. Yeah.
We were playing with this today. One of the things that you can do is leverage it to change the permissions on like a system DLL or something like that, and get yourself user permissions to it. And then you can just replace the DLL and get yourself elevation that way, right?
Yeah, you can get full permissions, read permissions, right? Like so, the SAM's a great execution. Like Serious SAM's been an issue. SAM nightmares are like a huge problem, right? We've been dealing with these for the last few months. But the ability for you as a system level access to gain access to system files, you can do. I mean, you can basically gain anything at this point. And we actually had a major software vendor have an issue similar to this that we reported this week to a big client. And they were like, well, this is local privilege escalation. What's the risk? What's the impact? They don't actually understand. Okay, so if you're able to gain local privilege escalation, you can gain system. This allows you to shut down all of your security products, shut down visibility. This allows you to gain credential access for cache credentials in memory, credentials in the registry, change registry hives, execute things against servers via PS1 files or local script runs, capture credentials for services that are being scanned from remote hosts that are doing authenticated scans. So really you have to think about this outside of the local privilege escalation and think about the impacts to the local network and what this allows you to do from that local system because you gain privilege escalation on that system. So this is actually very, very big. In an enterprise, when you start talking about local privilege escalation, you really are talking about an entire corporate breach or enterprise breach if you don't have the appropriate firewalls, network segmentation. Even your security stack comes under scrutiny because of the things you can manipulate via WMI, WinRM, any of the DCOM or RPC calls in order to do things against other systems because you've got local privilege escalation. So it is a pretty big finding.
Sweet.
Wow, that was a lot. That
was
was
a lot to unpack.
that was
You get college credit for that little thing.
That's right. That was very sexy, Tyler.
Yeah. I'm going to need a minute.
You get 5 seconds. So, So I want to ask you guys a question. If you agree or disagree, there was an article. And ExtraHop is a sponsor of the network, and they have been. And I've spent a lot of time with the team, and they're awesome. However, I think it's debatable, and depending on the situation, they wrote an article how decryption of network traffic can improve security. And I think this is a really hot topic and can be debated. And in the article, they say today it's nearly impossible to tell good from bad without the ability to decrypt traffic securely. You guys agree with that?
Yeah.
I think it's situation dependent.
Well, I mean, if you can't look inside that layer 7 content, you can't tell what's in there. So if it's being decrypted by an app locally, once it gets on the system, it's too late. So if you're trying to filter it at the border, or you're trying to filter it before it gets on the system where it can execute with privilege, if you can't look at it because it's encrypted, it's essentially obfuscated shell code. So you don't know what it could be anything.
But isn't
and if you're doing good encryption, right? Should you be able to look at that at whatever border you're looking at? Like, yeah, there's some SSL decryption, but that's got a whole nother implication that we don't usually talk about with next gen's firewalls.
Yeah. Now, Tyler,
right? So,
I will defer to ExtraHop because I believe they have patented technology to deal with this, and I have spoken with them about it, and it's really interesting and awesome in the way that they do it. And they do it run really fast as well and very secure. And so I really would love to have them back on the show to talk about it because they really have a great story.
ExtraHop is one of the few companies that I would say doesn't count for most of the companies and how they do this.
That's the sense I got in talking with them. I'm like, they do have the authority, I think, to write an article like this without us completely shredding them, because they do speak with some authority on this issue. They put more R&D and are very smart about it, above and beyond all of the SSL decryption I think that we've traditionally kind of seen in the past.
So probably the only company I would say does that right, honestly.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, I'm just saying you should do it in the sense that you assume it's secure. I mean, I obviously if it's just some hacked up process, it's not a good idea. But if you've got content coming in that's being reassembled on local machines that you can't see at the border, there's no telling what that stuff is, and you have no way to deal with it. So it could be anything.
Jeff?
Having worked for an agency that for many decades has tried to
that's classified.
Various methods of backdoors and escrowed keys and things like that, so you could get the decryption if you needed to. I guess my question is, why would anybody implicitly trust an organization or an entity? I'm just going to throw the question out there over a nation state or government for providing better security by basically reading the mail.
Well, I think it's still very much under your control, Jeff. Right? Like if I establish SSL encryption, right? Mm-hmm. I myself, I'm entrusting myself with those keys, right? And so if I need to implement a solution that is a tool for me to then also decrypt that traffic and trust.
Now, are you speaking metaphorically? You're a company, or you're
you're a company, right? And you trust your administrators to manage the keys. You also give them a tool that's going to decrypt stuff, and by extension, they're going to use that tool, in their arsenal. Is kind of that's the narrative, and that's the way I remember it from ExtraHop. And I'm forgetting all of the details, and I will totally defer to ExtraHop. Like, if you're looking at this solution, you have questions, you should ask them, because I think Tyler and I both have kind of looked under the hood and gone, no, like that actually makes sense. Yeah.
No, they do a good job. And really, if you're thinking from the attacker's mindset and you're looking at what your risk threat profile is, honestly, encryption, breaking, decryption, like looking at protocols, looking at all the, the Hellmans of the world, and like what I'm trying to do with traffic, even at layer 3 and 4, an attacker is not usually targeting that level of traffic. You're usually at the endpoint. If I'm going to be targeting that, the endpoint can decrypt these, just like when we talk about Signal. And, when someone comes up with a vulnerability in Signal, it's not a vulnerability. It's the fact that the endpoint can be breached and we can read the data because, well, it needs to be read by a human on the other end. So usually an attacker just thinks the same way.
I want to just bring up this point because I was listening to Darknet Diaries. It's not the most recent episode, but the one before that. And he interviews someone who's essentially a cyber criminal. And like the criminal aspect of this story is just amazing. So he was making fake IDs. That was one of his criminal offenses. He was a moderator on various dark web sites. And he was illegal drug trafficking because he was both using Adderall and Xanax, but also ordering them from the dark web, and had a network of people that were selling them on the streets, to the point where his town had like a I don't know if pandemic's the right word, an epidemic. Epidemic of Xanax usage, illegal Xanax drug usage.
You don't get a panic with Xanax usage.
Right, exactly. You're not panicked. That's the problem, right? But it was so prevalent in his town that he attributed that to the Xanax that he was bringing in, right? And I mean, he's like, I made some horrible mistakes and all that stuff. But he was, and in this story that relates to this topic, right? He was communicating with, it wasn't Silk Road. What was the other one? Something Bay, something.
Pirate Bay.
Not Pirate Bay. The other
Alpha
Bay. Thank you very much.
Okay.
He was communicating with the Alpha Bay admin. He said the only way the Alpha Bay admin would communicate me was using Jabber with OTR. Then, I won't spoil the story, but at some point in the story, he's speaking to law enforcement, and law enforcement presents him an entire chat transcript of his communications with the admin at Alpha Bay. He was like, and they didn't go into it in the show. He's like, how did they get that? I'm like, dude, they got that because the law enforcement had implanted malware on the admin of Alpha Bay's system, or your system, or both. And that's where the traffic was decrypted, and that's how they got your chat logs, dude. Like, at some point when you're reading the message, that shit's not encrypted anymore.
Right, it gets encrypted somewhere.
100%. Yeah, that layer 3 traffic does exist. Like, we have visibility into 98% of all the traffic. Like, we can see both sides of your Tor connections, your VPN connections. Like, we can see where you enter and exit depending on the density of the traffic to that node. Like, that's all pretty easily attributable.
Like, criminals are using encryption. So, like, but how does the U.S. government know what these nation-state hackers are doing? I'm like, that's because they broke into their systems and they put malware on them. They got a keystroke logger or whatever it is, right? Like,
yeah. Like once you got the intel to know who's talking to who and who you're after, then you target them. You use the 0-day, the exploit, the C2 kit, whatever it is. You go after that particular target, and you are very, very focused and deliberate on how you're gaining access and what you're reading. Mm-hmm. Your end goal is the endpoints of those people that have interesting traffic. So the traffic is merely the starting point of all of this analysis.
So this article bothers me on many levels. Because it's basically just saying, hey, we should have the ability to decrypt network traffic, and gives reasons why that's a good thing. Okay, I can live with that. But how do you get there? Are you suggesting an escrow system? Are you suggesting network administrators have extra sets of keys? Is there a master key? I mean, this is still harkening back to methodologies that have been suggested for the last 25, 30 years.
I agree, Jeff. And to be honest with you, I don't remember. And I know, like Tyler and I are saying, like, there is a really slick way that they're doing it. But aside from that, I do agree. Like, if Tyler and I are exchanging encrypted messages, we should only be the only two people to be able to read those messages, right? And in this example, ExtraHop aside, or whatever technology you're using, that means there's another system that has the clear text or plain text version of that message, right? So you are inherently you are increasing your exposure, in that it's not just Tyler and I that know what those messages are. It's this other system as well. Therefore, it does increase your exposure at the basic level. I think it does.
Or to use the terminology from the previous segment, we're increasing the the attack threshold, the attack surface.
Agreed.
Because it's one more thing to have to manage. It's one more set of keys to have to control with some unknown number of people that have access to it, which are likely to have some sort of administrative level of access. And nobody abuses that in any organization.
Well, you have to. I think you have to weigh the risk and reward, right? That's an extra risk for the level of protection, and that's where I think in a lot of circumstances.
But I go back to my first statement. How is this any different from nation states, U.S. government proposing this? At a national, international level. I mean, essentially, you're saying, well, this is good for the private organization to do it, but don't let the government do it. It's the exact same scenario, the exact same good reasons why you should want to decrypt.
Yeah,
I think you're spot on, Jeff. Like until we really have the ability to manage credentials better and or manage keys better, and we have good guidance that is well accepted, that is well adopted, and configurations that follow these policies, like internally, I think the corporation's a great test bed. I don't think that government is at a place they're underfunded, underutilized. They have systems that need more budget and more smart people to do these things. So we can test at the corporate level, but we still have to understand that we've not even gotten the grasp on credentials, like our ability to do proxying of credentials, much less keys and cryptographic things that are outside of the normal IT or even security person's full breadth of understanding of how these things work. I don't think that there's a company out there doing this very well, outside of ExtraHop. Honestly, like ExtraHop's doing some cool stuff. So do we actually look at how they're doing this and realize that from an internal standpoint, we need to do SSL decryption so we can see where all this traffic's going, so we can provide intel and value and stop malicious attackers from hiding stuff inside of SSL. That's probably not going to help. I'm going to tell you right now, like, my stuff is decoded inside the SSL stream, and unless you've got the private keys off my server, that doesn't do you any good. So I still don't see a huge advantage for the level of effort that's happening at this point in time, and to provide that backdoor capability to organizations and governments that can't seem to keep, their own private keys secret, much less are a mass conglomerate of public keys secret. That seems to be a problem at this point in time. I think that may be something that comes in the future that, we can look at providing and outsourcing some of that security to our government if we trust the level of visibility that they gain, but that's a long ways down the road until they can prove that. we're at a point where we can't even do that with inside small organizations.
But I guess I didn't read it as I'm giving over control of my network to the government. I read it as I'm a network security administrator. I have a set of policies on my enterprise. I see some guy in the marketing department downloading encrypted material off the internet. I'd like to know what that is before it gets to that endpoint. I mean, so
I'm not saying the article says the government. I'm saying it's.
I don't agree with that. Then I completely agree with you, but that wasn't my take on it. I was thinking about it more.
But I'll play devil's advocate, Doug, in that I don't necessarily, in most scenarios, need to know what the encrypted content is. That if I'm seeing encrypted communications between two systems or two users that I can tie to those systems, that in and of itself is anomalous.
Well, if that's your policy, and I mean,
that's my indicator.
It's just that's become. But right? I think I thought their point was that that's becoming more of a problem in that you're not going to be able to say we don't allow encrypted point-to-point communications because like Zoom is end-to-end encrypted, so that's going to be going across your border, and you can't tell what the content is.
I'm going to pin it to the protocol and say that I know when it's Zoom that encrypted communications is normal, but maybe if it's not Zoom
fine.
is the application, maybe when it's not Zoom is the protocol.
Slack,
maybe
O365, Gmail,
right.
all of these are C2 channels. So.
Right. It could be also, when you look at files, for example, like how often does someone encrypt a file? But if they're encrypting all of the files on that file share, that's probably ransomware. Like that's my indicator of compromise. I don't necessarily need to know the contents of those or the message within that encrypted communications for it to be an indicator of compromise. That's the devil's advocate. But that's the devil's advocate.
I have grave reservations about it in practice, but academically, I look at it and go, I get to me, I got what they were saying in the article. I mean, I don't disagree with it from an academic perspective. On a personal privacy level and all these other issues, I'll concede.
And your personal privacy point is what I want to address, which is that, we talk to law enforcement about encryption and go, hey, we get to have encryption. And law enforcement keeps putting up these bills and trying to make it law. No, we need to have back doors. And on the corporate level, it's the same thing. You're making the argument that I need to be able to see what's going on before it gets to somebody's endpoint or so that I can make sure that the corporation is safe, right? And Paul is saying, well, as long as you look at what they're doing with it, you can find the anomalies and look for the dangerous ones.
Well, it's my network, and I'll do what I want.
That's exactly my point. Is we're using the exact same argument, but in a nation-state government context, we're saying, "Ooh, Big Brother, bad." But in a corporate context, we're saying, "Oh, yeah, that's a pretty good idea."
No, I'm saying it in your network bad, my network good.
Do as I say.
I mean, I don't think there's any value there. Like, let's go back to the point of what's the value as a hacker. I'm going to have a layer of encryption inside of whatever SSL you're doing. Like, I don't want to stand out. I want to blend in. I'm going to use Slack. I'm going to use Gmail. I'm going to use Zoom for my C2 channels. It's going to look like normal traffic. All of my stuff's going to be encrypted as normal traffic inside of that stream. So what is the actual value versus the risk that you're
probably none against Tyler.
But it would be interesting, Tyler, in your example, and I don't know if this is possible, somewhat maybe with SSL. Can I tell if it's encrypted with my key versus someone else's key?
Absolutely.
Without
legal decrypted or not.
Only if you're breaking the tunnel and reassembling it. So
I can match a public key to a private key with an algorithm and know that that's the private key that goes with that public key using
that's back to credentials now.
But that's using but you can use the modular. So I've done that because I suck at administration, and I'm like, wait, is that SSL private key the one that I use to generate this public key? So when I need to renew my cert, like, I'm going to renew the cert, but is that the same private key that matches with that? And and I don't pretend to know how the math works, but I can use the modulus function that's implemented in OpenSSL to match, right? I don't need to know all the information about the private
credentials.
You can do a match on it. Yeah. If I have access to the private key, I can do a match and go, that matches the public key.
Right? Like if that matches Slack or if that matches O365 and like my traffic is going to that SaaS application as Slack traffic to a Slack bot, then again, we go back to most nation states, most good criminals, anybody using good C2 is going to get their traffic to a highly reputable domain using tools and APIs that are existent for, valid traffic. So yeah, it's going to slack.com. It's their Slack API. You're getting the right Slack cert. Your ability to tell the difference between my traffic and like regular traffic, your SSL decryption doesn't make a difference.
And I'm relying on anomaly detection for that to see if it behaves differently than what I'm normally seeing. But there's inevitably.
So you don't have to decrypt the SSL traffic.
Right.
You look for
that's my point. Yeah.
Well, I agree with that. I'm just trying to stop the guy in marketing from gambling.
You're decrypting it or not, right? Isn't that what the article is suggesting? Of course, the article didn't go into how this gets done. But you're either getting a copy of the legitimate key or you're putting in an extra, master key.
You're getting a brokerage key that has certain decryption functions built into the brokerage key that has functions for certain traffic that is only on your endpoint for a limited time as part of a JWT, if I remember right.
So you're using different terminology. It's either a copy of the key that's being used, or it's an additional key. You can call it a brokerage key, a master key.
It's an additional key.
It's an additional key, or it's a copy of the existing key. There's only two ways of doing this.
I mean, where I have a problem with this is kind of time frame, right? I mean, this argument of decrypting and having plain text network traffic can help security. Yeah, that was relevant in about 1994, right? Today we have a situation where we have cloud resident services that are ubiquitous, and we don't own the network between us and the destination, and therefore encryption is necessary for good reasons. So doesn't the argument really boil down to where the encryption is occurring? I mean, we're making the assumption in our heads.
It's where it's terminating.
Well, that's my point, Jeff. That's my point.
Yep.
We're making the argument that decryption is being terminated on the endpoint. It doesn't have to be. There's always an encrypt-decrypt cycle that could occur in the middle somewhere, as we're well aware. And I would also add in the point that prior to if you look at the particular TLS context, prior to TLS 1.3, there was some characteristics that we could determine, right? We could look at the certificate exchange. We could look at the some aspects, right, of that TLS exchange. Now with TLS 1.3, I think it's really raising the bar on people, because they're like, well, shit, everything now, key exchange and the whole smash is now with perfect forward secrecy is now not available to us. So people are really starting to ask the real question, well, I can't tell the difference. I can't. And just like Tyler said, I guarantee you when I'm hacking your network, I sure as shit am using TLS, and I'm probably double wrapping. I'm probably encrypting inside of that encrypted tunnel too. All right, that's it. Rant over.
So may I?
Yes, please, Jeff.
So, I mean, this is where I am having flashbacks back to the old days of my early days at NSA, where the mission when I started was mostly capturing signals out of the air, and you either did something with it or you didn't. You could break the code, break the ciphers, decrypt the messages, or you did a lot of other stuff to investigate what was going on. I just see a lot of parallels in terms of methodology to what we used to do, and it sort of went away because digital came along. But it seems like we're hearkening back to that. Okay, you can't
analysis matters.
Analysis matters, and you can't read the underlying payload, the data, but there's a whole lot of other things you can derive from.
There's a whole lot of data going somewhere.
Yeah.
Sometimes I guess my point is sometimes that's the anomaly, right? And you can measure it on frequency. You can measure it on volume. Sometimes you can derive hypotheses. Sometimes pretty good ones that you might be able to test to say something's wrong or something's right? Like if there is all of a sudden more encrypted communications in a particular scenario, like something's up. Are they planning an attack, Are they exfiltrating data? Are they doing ransomware?
Or DNS. DNS is a great example.
And I agree that gets you so far. And maybe to do further analysis, you do need to decrypt the traffic. But I think you can do a fair amount of valid analytics to answer questions, enough questions to determine if there's malicious behavior without decrypting the traffic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I agree with that. I think what's really happened is it's driven all of our analysis into the endpoints, and we know that's happened. We're either on the client side or on the server side, right? A lot of us are treating the network as just utility in the middle at this point.
So what you're saying, Java, is we just need keystroke loggers on all our workstations, and then encryption doesn't matter.
The network is the broadcast. And like I said, in the old days, we were intercepting signals out of the air, and for the most part, we could read them, given time and cryptanalysis, or we couldn't. And very quickly, it was emerging in the time that I was there in the mid-'80s to mid-'90s. There was more digital cryptography emerging and machine cryptography emerging, where more and more we were basically throwing away the payload, the data portion of the communication. But I think the analogy to a packet or a set of packets holds up. But it was the header information, the twos in the front. I mean, one of the skill aptitude tests that I took in order to get employment was looking at a whole bunch of communications traffic, which would roughly be the equivalent of looking at a bunch of network traffic, Wireshark output, and not reading the payload, not reading the data, but looking what can patterns. You derive from the header information? Yeah. What patterns can you,
right?
In the context of back then, it was, can you figure out which source address is headquarters, and can you figure out a hierarchy, in a military context, headquarters, battalion, division, platoon, and stuff like that. What could you map out? Kind of like network mapping.
Yeah.
I mean, the parallels to me are just mind-boggling in terms of, I thought that was all defunct and archaic and just another way I'm a dinosaur, and yet it seems to be coming back and becoming more, there's some lessons to be learned in history, and there's some, there's at least one organization out there that has a pretty solid history of gleaning interesting information out of very little apparent context.
Sure, but
Those
I mean,
who
to
do not remember
contradict
their
my
history are doomed to repeat it.
Yeah, but to contradict myself, also knowing what the message says is the best intelligence versus the information you can glean from the patterns in signaling without decoding the message, right?
No, sorry, I'm going to disagree with you very strongly, actually. And I'm going to use. I respect what you're saying. Please don't misunderstand. I don't mean to be rude, but in spoken communication, in verbal communication, how much of the meaning, the content, comes from the actual words that I speak?
But the fact that
you're sounding like a boomer, Josh.
No, but the fact that
it's all about the emoticon.
But the fact that you and I are talking, Josh, could be interesting information.
No. That's my point.
Yeah. No, I think we're agreeing.
No, seriously, this is an actual question. How much of the content of the communication, of the conversation, is through the actual words that are spoken? Do you happen to know?
I think the timing of that matters, though, right? Like, if you're real time and you have the ability to see that real time, then that makes a difference in, say, a breach. If you can see what commands I'm running and where my targets are and what I'm actually communicating against, that makes a difference. However, 99.99% of all the SIMs and AVs and XDRs and EDRs out there have no relevance and cannot look at what I'm doing real time. So they have no ability to track that. What I ran 15 minutes ago, when it hits your log, has very little relevance of your ability to track me and figure out what I'm doing. I'm done, gone, owned your system, and well past that point. So I think you're spot on. Like, it matters if you have the ability to have that real-time intelligence, which almost no one has, especially in SSL decryption.
No, I think it's interesting. If I put it in the context of like the Code Girls book that I read, and we were analyzing messages from Japanese fleet and commands, right? You may be able to know that, like, hey, based on the level of messages that are being sent out and intercepted between the Japanese ships and fleets, that maybe they're like up to something. But
it's much more interesting to know what
I don't know what they're
structural
targeting.
app.
I don't know where they're going to target or where they're going to go. I know that they're planning something, right? And that's one level of intelligence. But if I can decode the messages, then I know like they're going to go attack this particular position.
Well, to your point, though, even the ability to understand and see the messages and the high level of who's communicating with who and where it's going. If you're Microsoft, if you're Walmart, if you're one of the governments, and you have the ability to interact with the infrastructure teams of those major corporations and shut down AWS instances, shut down large cloud droplets, if you're able to cause disruption at a large scale because you can see who's communicating with who, and understand that botnet traffic, then you're able to cause a disruption at a much larger and much more impactful and meaningful manner. We should move on to your story.
I think we beat that one to death. But it was a great conversation.
Good.
One last analogy, very brief. I can give a perfect real world example. Back in the early '90s, at the time of what came to be known as the first Gulf War, Desert Shield, Desert Storm, local media in the Washington D.C. area accurately predicted that Desert Shield was transitioning to Desert Storm because they observed on one particular evening dozens of pizza delivery trucks showing up at the Pentagon.
Yep. It's a great example.
Simply said, hey, somebody's staying late at the Pentagon. That's a great example. What in the world could be happening? We're about to start a war.
Yeah.
Period.
Great example, Jeff.
All right,
not as impactful. I do want to talk about hacking fingerprints and I think this is a really silly kind of trick, if you will. My story number 10. So basically, you can take a picture of a fingerprint. So if someone has left their fingerprint on a glass or a screen, you can take a picture of that. You can print out that fingerprint on, is it acetate paper? Did I say that correctly?
Yes.
Acetate sheet.
This is old.
Very old. And then use wood glue to make a copy of that and defeat, even today, fingerprint scanners. I'm not sure which thing.
So when we were melting gummy bears to make fingerprints,
and,
this is
what was the
10 years old.
Oh, but what was the silly putty? Silly putty.
So this is super old. Like let's be frank. Like we've all done this. We've all tried this. We all still use this once in a while.
Right.
However, you start to look at who did this research and what fingerprints are now protecting. If I look at something like my crypto wallets and my ability to do two-factor authentication, which is now biometric for a lot of these applications that are on the phone. So when we say two-factor, we're saying our ability to access the phone and our ability to have the phone. If my phone is stolen and someone has stolen my fingerprint, their ability to access the phone is done by a fingerprint. Their ability to access my applications is also done by a fingerprint. And the authorization to do funding and other things is also handled by a fingerprint and two-factor, which is also managed by a fingerprint on the same device. So we've kind of come up to this conundrum where our phones are now the most vital piece of our entire financial ecosystem.
And so scary,
I'll add fuel to the fire on that. I just got a new Pixel Pixel 6 Pro. Yeah, Pixel 6 Pro. It's a freaking awesome phone. Huh? I love the phone. However, the fingerprint reader is on the screen, on the front, which I'm not a huge fan of. Like I've had Pixels where it's facial recognition, right? And then they got rid of that because of the masks and the pandemic, right?
Because someone broke that.
Because someone broke that, and I liked it when I was on the back of the phone. It was more convenient.
Yeah, it's convenient. It's perfectly placed. Yeah.
Now they've moved it to the front of the phone, but again, on the screen, I feel like they can't do the level of detail they need to do in a fingerprint. And I read an article because I started researching like Pixel 6, and I'm like, I want to know more about like how this works and what people are doing. And they said to increase the accuracy of your fingerprint reader on the Pixel 6, that you add it, so you do your first, like I did my thumbs, right? And so you do my right thumb and my left thumb in one pass of each. And then they're like, to get higher degrees of accuracy, add an additional finger, but use your same thumb. Use your right thumb, use your left thumb.
Are you allowed to use the middle finger?
You can use whatever you want, Jeff, but I'll leave that to your imagination, to what you want to use to do that,
but
right?
that's convenience. If you have to open your phone or open your app when you're trying to do that and you're like, which fucking finger am I using? Am I like doing 3 combinations of this in order to make a fast Bitcoin transaction where the market,
you have to make certain gang symbols that they can recognize.
my point is that if I do my right finger twice, like it's a little more lenient as to what it will accept for my fingerprint, so that it scans my fingerprint with a higher degree of accuracy, which I think, my guess is, would make these biometric tricks that we all know and love, from gummy bears to silly putty to wood glue to acetate and all that stuff, a lot more viable as an attack. So like the users are actually, you could make that easier for the attacker, because I'm scanning my right finger thumb like twice on the phone, so it scans more quickly, right? I think it gives it a lot more kind of leniency into how.
Well, we start to think about where our phones exist. Like we go to the bathroom, we have our phones at a store. We go to dinner, like we set our phones down on the table.
Yeah,
we're at our house, we put it on the side of a bedstand. Our phones, and the ability for those phones to be stolen by a motivated attacker, by someone that is financially motivated. If you have a substantial amount of crypto, think about how much effort it would take to steal a phone from someone that's sitting at a bar, sitting at a dinner, sitting
people just
their family, going into a family's home.
Right.
Like those are pretty trivial.
But then, as we know, we're lazy, and the fingerprint, like rather than entering my PIN code or forcing, another password, or God forbid, like using a YubiKey every single time I want to pay for something with Google Pay, or what I love, convenience factor, ordering stuff online on my phone. Hey, I hit my fingerprint and it reads from the secure enclave to read my credit card information, and all I needed to do
Amazon
to trigger
Pay,
that,
Google Pay, Apple Pay, like
fingerprint, is my authentication for it to unlock my LastPass, pay for things with my credit cards, all of that stuff.
Think about what's in your LastPass. Like, take this past your crypto, go
There's
to your
nothing in my LastPass because I don't use it.
Bypass LastPass, OnePass, whatever it is. Go to your backup codes that you save in your password manager.
Right.
And now, like, the world is your oyster.
Yeah,
like,
but I don't. So what I recommend and what I practice.
Tyler, where's your Bitcoin thumb drive? And this is password protected.
Shit. See, and then you run into convenience and that
you can overcompensate. But what
if
I do is,
finds it, we can access the Bitcoin, can't we?
So
50%.
What I do is, there are certain credentials that I recommend for folks you don't store in LastPass. Like LastPass is for your everyday stuff. You take out so you need a second factor to get into your LastPass, right? But also like
you need a second factor password manager.
Yeah, your Google account, your crypto wallets, your bank accounts aren't stored in LastPass. That's shit that you remember. You remember for us. You remember those passwords, and you require a second factor. So if someone does get into your LastPass, they're not getting some of those keys to the kingdom that it could impact you financially.
So again, we go back to this. Like, outside of the security community, we know that there's a lot of very rich crypto heads out there that are super smart, have a lot of crypto, that deal in crypto all day. Like, just taking one block of people, how do we recommend they manage that crypto, manage their passwords, manage their two-factor, manage multiple LastPass, OnePass, segregate those, have two-factor, have a YubiKey and some hardware? Like, how do we get to a point where we're able to secure some of this without having to get this complicated? Because I'm going to tell you, there's not a billionaire in the world that I know of and have dealt with that is going to do some of the things that I am asking them to do.
That's absolutely true, Tyler. That you're right on. We have a serious problem, right? We're still reliant on passwords and now second factor and biometrics that are fallible. We haven't come up with a solution yet. I mean, that's really where it's at.
Well, there is no solution, Jeff. I don't think. I mean,
I don't think there is.
There are solutions. There are solutions, Jeff. Just got to know. Sometimes you just don't use your finger.
There are no solutions.
Well, I want to hear both sides of this. Like, I want to hear the curmudgeon side of both of these arguments, because I'm honestly at a point where I have no idea what to recommend to billionaire clients.
Yeah, like how hard can you make it to prove who you are, right? And that's that security and convenience thing. If you make it too hard to prove who you are, you can easily lock yourself out of shit.
Yeah.
If you make it too easy to prove who you are, that means other people can impersonate
Or you lose shit.
Yeah. Or you lose millions or billions of dollars, right?
And these days with deep fakes and Voco,
Blackbeard
it's
have
impossible.
A problem? Blackbeard buried his treasure somewhere and nobody knows where it is, but it's very secure.
So you're not wrong. History repeats itself, and this is.
Look at Tyler's Bitcoin. Look at Tyler's Bitcoin. He has buried that in the most secure place ever.
Never found again.
Never to be found again. If there's 100 years from now, people are going to have like maps like Tyler was a pirate.
The mystery of Tyler's gold.
It's going to be like Goonies all over again.
Yeah.
There's going to be all kinds of traps and stuff.
Somebody finds a USB stick in an old trash dump and
treasure.
gives them that one big clue. And
Dude, that's happening now. There's a guy.
I'm going to put that in my will. I'm going to die.
But hold on. Josh has a great point. There's a guy in the UK that went to the trash dump and he wanted to search the dump for it, right?
Yeah.
And he rented a backhoe and he's there now.
Oh, really?
Like years later, looking for this frigging hard. He's like, I've got the passphrase. All I got to do is find the hard drive.
And has got a permission to have a backhoe to dig through the trash for a thumb drive.
No, it was. I think it was a 3.5-inch hard drive, like an internal hard drive. But
gotcha.
Like still, he's looking through an entire landfill, which he has no idea where the damn thing went, and he's like tracing garbage truck records and interviewing the people that drove on the landfill. It's a real life treasure hunt. He's got about, I think it was $10 million on that hard drive.
Oh my god!
See, I got more than that on mine. Wow.
So
no way! No, you don't have more than 10 million. Get the
dude. It's up to 16 right now.
Okay, I'm gonna have to go because I'm gonna start tracing Tyler's.
Tyler's house.
I'll be out there tomorrow.
You know what the funny part? Tyler, hold on. Now, Tyler, have people flown out to your house to help you look for it?
Skip Duckwall, aka Pass the Hash, was out here very recently in the last few months, and he literally was imaging every hard drive and jump drive I have, looking for backups of my jump drive.
Wow!
Not just the jump drive.
Not stupid. Awesome. Not stupid. Hey, actually,
so you're not the first Doug to want to go help Tyler find this.
Yeah. If
for a small nominal fee of like $5 million. Yeah.
I was going to say we could start a GoFundMe.
50% is the standing offer. Anyone that wants to fly to Tyler's house.
That's going to be like a whole pile of people out there tomorrow with pickaxes.
Lining up. You're going to have an army of people.
So
there's another piece of this conundrum, and that's... let me throw something at you guys for a second. Ignore fingerprints for a minute. Just, with Apple, it's Face ID, right? And ignore the sorry?
I said Face ID is not a good idea either.
Agreed. And because let's just keep it to regular, normal, everyday things. When the cops pull you over, if they want you, they literally just hold the phone in front of your face, unlock your phone.
Yeah.
And anybody that's got you, whether it's a cop or a criminal or whatever, they just hold the phone in front of your face and boom, it's unlocked. So
it goes back to black bag.
I'll make you feel slightly better, Tyler. In the Darknet Diaries episode I was listening to with the criminal, he was getting paid in Bitcoin for a lot of what he was doing. And I think, but this is in like 2013, 2011, 2012, 2013 Bitcoin level. So he had like 256 Bitcoin. And he was just spending it.
Yeah, I bought 200 Bitcoin to buy pizza in 2010.
Yeah, he was just, I mean, I don't know if it makes you feel, but like he was spending it on like lavish things. So I feel like he had his fun with it. And then I think someone stole his Bitcoin wallet and already spent it. And then they found his laptop, which had some Bitcoin on it, but the laptop had like burned and died and didn't work anymore. So he lost all of his Bitcoin. Yeah. What is Bitcoin trading at now? One Bitcoin is what? 50? 60?
58,000.
58,000.
Yeah, 57,291 to be precise.
So that was some expensive pizza.
Do you want the curmudgeonly thoughts or not?
Yeah. Curmudgeonous. Is that a verb?
So,
I just use curmudgeonous as a verb.
Curmudgeonous? It is now.
I like it.
So we could go on all day and we're not going to solve this. What we need to remember is two forms of authentication are better than one, period.
Yes.
Nothing is perfect. There are just like in everything in our industry, there are no perfect 100% secure systems, and that's why I say there are no solutions.
Unless I send my data on a thumb drive to Tyler's house, in which case it's perfectly secure because no one will ever find it.
Yeah, but then you have the trade-off of it's not useful, and that's the concession that we're all making. This idea of convenience is also the fact that we've moved to a digital world, which is Pandora's box, and it's a reality, and it's been solved. But we get spun up on, legitimately so in many cases, the weaknesses and the ways that each of the different forms of authentication can be possibly exploited, some more easily than others. But again, generally speaking, two are better than one. And what I object to, though, is when companies, vendors are trying to sell a solution that are basically endorsing one of the three forms as being inherently more secure, more better than one of the others. Password is the classic, what we started with, which is something but the idea that any form of biometric, something that you are, is inherently better than something I would argue that's not necessarily the case. And we go on and on about what all the vulnerabilities are to facial recognition, fingerprints. We've been doing it here in the last 5-10 minutes. The same
something
with
you
something
are can be
that
taken, right?
Yeah, I mean they can all
something
be
you are can be
exploited.
taken. Something is a little bit more difficult to extract.
But
I want to extract something versus take something.
I want to talk
Firewall, the favorite movie of our guest from Qualis in the first segment. Firewall's the classic defeat. The whole premise of the movie is defeating two-factor authentication because they kidnap the guy's family and say, if you don't unlock the firewall and let us steal the money from the bank, I think it was a bank. It's been a while since I saw the movie. We're going to kill your kids.
I think it was Mike.
And all of us would do that.
I think it was Mike Kershaw who develops Kismet. Was just an awesome person in general. Talked about the security of your credentials in some relation to like the battery and jumper cables on parts of your body that you would not want jumper cables to be, and like that's the level you have to get to. Like if it gets to that point, like that's how many barriers you want to put to your personal OPSEC, right?
Well, yeah, makes sense.
But also, while we're talking about passwords, my story number 14. Despite the popularity of password managers, this study found that people are still using pen and paper. So they continually rely on what they call unsecure methods, such as computer documents, 53%.
15,
thank 50. You. And pen and paper, 29% to manage passwords. Is writing it down on a piece of paper really that more or less secure than keeping it in a digital password manager? I think that's kind of an interesting thing to think about, that if it is on a piece of paper that is in your possession or in your dwelling, how more or less secure is that than stored in a LastPass or any password vault that maybe you have a master password for, and maybe you have a two-factor authentication? Like, that means someone has physical access. And I think the number of attackers that have physical access versus can access my accounts via digital means is a sharp contrast. Mm-hmm. But maybe we go back to
why are password managers popular?
Because I can't remember all the passwords I need to remember.
They're easy.
Convenience. That's why they're popular.
Convenient.
Right?
Easy.
It's not necessarily for security. The number one reason they're popular is convenience. Secondary reason is they do offer additional security,
case.
And I think that's an arguable point.
I rest my case. Convenience.
I think in a corporate setting, though, your physical security risks are higher, depending on which type of organization you work in, because the number of people with physical access could be greater than those that may enter your home, for example. I'll give an example. If you work at a hospital, general public, lots of people are. Many of us have done physical pen tests on healthcare organizations, right? Really super hard. because the general public has access to healthcare facilities. Therefore, I think writing it down, inherent risk in a healthcare setting. If I write it down and I put it in, we all make fun of the notebooks for passwords for our parents and grandparents and other people, right? They're stored in my home. What are the chances an attacker is going to have access to my home? If they do, I'm probably screwed.
Well, no,
anyway.
I mean, and what I told my dad.
If you're targeted.
And what I told my dad,
if you're targeted.
But I mean, if you're targeted, you're targeted.
Yeah.
But what I told my dad, who was not that likely to be targeted, he wasn't wealthy. It was easier for him. I had him write his passwords on a sheet of paper, and they put them in the gun safe.
Sure.
And so somebody breaks in, they've still got to get into a physical thing.
Right.
And could they? Of course they could. But I mean, for my dad to put that stuff in, and my dad is deceased, so all of you people taking notes, it doesn't matter. But for him to put that in some kind of password vaulting system, I determined the risk was way greater.
Yeah.
For him doing that, because I wasn't sure he could manage the password vaulting system effectively, and that I knew he could manage the gun safe because he knew the combination. He was the only person who knew the combination, and when he died, I didn't know the combination, but I opened that gun safe, and there were all of his passwords. And for somebody to get that,
how'd you open? The next logical question is how'd you open?
My dad, it was a two-factor analog. My dad had. I set this up.
Now, was it a safe in that it had like a dial, or was it a key?
It was a dial safe.
It was a dial. Okay.
And he had actually I used to call a red card that he put the combination of safe in a safety deposit box, and my brother had a key to that safety deposit box.
I remember you telling me that.
And when he died, we went and opened the safety deposit box.
Got
the red card was in there, had the combination of the safe, and which I think I could have guessed anyway, but an attacker couldn't have guessed the combination.
Or you cracked. I mean, Deviant's done talks. He's a guest coming up on this show in a couple of weeks. But there are safe cracking.
Of course,
I'm not familiar with it. Deviant's
nothing's perfect.
On that. Yeah,
somebody can break a Chubb safe. I mean, it's been done. It's just really hard, and you have to. That's always the thing about risk. You have to decide where is the point you want to be. Am I worried?
My kids watch those stupid YouTube videos where they get a safe and they're trying to crack it open, right?
Yeah.
And they're like they get like the axes and like all this ridiculous stuff that's just to get viewers and subscribers on YouTube. And I'm telling kids, like, that safe has like a backup like tubular lock. Like, you would just get a tubular lock pick set and pick that lock. You wouldn't go after it with a Sawzall. Like, you're not.
There's
it just wasn't that level of risk. It wasn't launch codes. It wasn't hundreds of millions in Bitcoin. It was just literally the password so that you could get back onto his computer. And he would forget that, and he needed the password. He could open his safe and look the password up. It was a perfectly reasonable system for him. Now, is that the solution for every person? I don't think so, but it is a solution, and I think the pencil and paper thing may work depending on how you handle it.
Yeah.
If you're writing your password on Post-it notes and stick it on a monitor, that's horrible.
Or you write it down on a piece of paper and then you take a picture of it with your phone.
Exactly. But I mean, on the other hand,
me old-fashioned, but I believe in manual processes over automated processes on just about anything. I concede that automated processes are necessary.
Jeff,
but, I mean, I used
Jeff,
to recommend.
You're old-fashioned.
I am old-fashioned.
Well, you told me to call you that. So.
But does that make
Call me
you more
old-fashioned.
secure? Like, now that I think about old-fashioned and all the shit that you guys used to do, and like you look at even nostalgic things like fucking COBOL programming, right?
Look, Tyler's got the COBOL. He's got a COBOL programming.
Right.
Look,
With
he's got a punch card.
Ooh.
Oh, look, a Turbo Pascal.
Oh my God!
For an hour and a half to pull those books out. Nice.
But
segue
you look at those old things and like the way you guys used to do it. There's a reason you did it. There's a reason it worked. And now we're back to a point where the stuff that we're doing now is history repeating itself, and we're making the same mistakes. So we're not learning anything, and we're doing the same thing. So the older way of doing things seems to be the more secure way long term. Like, it's proven and tried.
Oh, I got one for you. You know how I used to keep secure programs from executing?
My voice is my passport.
No, long before that. I would literally take the 13th and 13 and 8. The 13th and the 21st card out of the card deck and put them in my lock drawer. If somebody took that program and ran it when I wasn't there, it wouldn't run. It would crash. It's just that simple. Those were not COBOL. They were Fortran programs, but it would just crash them every time. It wouldn't run.
That's awesome.
It's simple, effective, and nobody knew I was doing it. So if somebody tried to run one, they'd call and go, "Hey, this program, we were trying to run it. It crashed." I'm like, yeah, really? Huh, interesting. Why were you trying to run that?
Because I thought it was a program that stole everyone's passwords on the mainframe. Because that's probably, knowing you, that's what it was.
But it was effective. You know, it was simple, effective. I didn't have to buy a security solution, and it worked just fine. Very telling. Oh, silly stories.
14.
Let's transition to
it.
Silly stories.
Story.
Matrix is the best hacker movie.
Yes. I want to talk
Yes, 100%.
I thought this story was going to be complete bunk, and then I looked at the fact they interviewed Dino Dizovi and Kate Moe, and I was like, oh, those are people that I know, love, and respect, and the
graphics alone was worth it.
I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it. Like you have to read this article. What I don't know my story number is 19.
Plus they call out war games, sneakers, and hackers all in the same article.
But like the way that they presented their argument, you'd be hard pressed as a hacker to argue with it, to be quite honest with you.
I just love the tagline here. The Wachowskis invented the ultimate cyber superhero. I mean,
yeah.
It doesn't get better than that.
I mean,
But
in like Quentin Tarantino's style, they borrowed from a lot of previous works, but put their own spin on it. Right, and made it something that I think is really truly unique. And there's actually been a lot of presentations in cybersecurity about that like nothing is truly unique. I'm sure that's not just cybersecurity that's done that as well, right? Like we all borrow from the past, and the Wachowski brothers certainly did that. They borrowed from a lot of anime, martial arts. Things like that, and they just created this world. Like Dino says, the Matrix shows the universe that software can create, and the more that software controls everything in our lives, the more awe-inspiring it becomes to have power over that software. Like you got to read this article. It's really amazing. I can't really do it justice. Dino says the Matrix captures the feeling of hacking, right?
It does. It totally does. That's exactly right. That is exactly right. The article is fantastic. I read it. It's spot on.
Now, there's a new Matrix movie coming out.
I heard that, yeah.
It is coming out. It was being filmed the last time we were in San Francisco, which was RSA 2020, down the street from that cigar shop we were at, Paul.
Oh, interesting. That's like the one cigar shop in San Francisco. Hopefully, it's still there if we go back. When we go back, I'm going. Are you guys going to RSA?
When we go back?
Are you guys going to RSA?
You're going to have to say when. Yeah.
I already booked my plane flights for 2022. I was going to say, I mean, conceptually, the Matrix reflects hacking, but even the article concedes there isn't a whole lot of hacking in the Matrix. So it's much more the mindset, the mentality. Yeah, I would get into that. Whereas the other movies, which are sacrosanct in my book, delve more into the actual methodologies and thought processes and actions. So, we can add Matrix, make it the top 4. How's that, Paul?
Yeah, no, I agree, Jeff. I think there are the addition of Firewall to the list. I thought was an interesting one, and where that falls. I have to go back and rewatch it to really come up with the. I think there's.
I still like Black Hat too, though. Like Black Hat doesn't make our list very often.
That's the thing. Yeah. That's like Thor. Isn't Thor's in Black Hat, right?
I've never watched Black Hat on principle. So maybe I'll, if I'm extremely bored someday, I'll watch it.
It's not totally horrible. I mean, it ranks.
I haven't watched Snowden either.
I don't know. You can pick on the net though, but the net is kind of interesting to watch now too. Like I think all of the movies that
they all had something.
They did, and it's all thought provoking based on what we all do today and have experienced in our careers. And I think that's what makes it really interesting. Josh, I think you were the one that brought
Also,
up the point.
swordfish.
Swordfish brings up really interesting.
An icebreaker question that I often ask when I'm giving talks. Back in the day when I used to give talks, I'd put up a slide and just show up the movie posters for a bunch of different hacker movies and ask people, what's your favorite hacker movie? And then I would go on to explain that based on what the response is, that helps me to understand what the person is about in terms of what their view of hacking, what their view of security is.
So what does Swordfish say about the audience?
Wait. That they like blowjobs? No. In all seriousness, which hacker movie, irrespective of which was your favorite, which hacker movie has been the most influential on the hacker world?
Hackers.
Swordfish. We all get the
Sneakers.
girls and we all make good money now.
No, none of those are correct. Try again.
Skyfall.
Nope.
No, which is the James Bond movie where the guy's invincible?
Not that one.
I love
Golden.
No, it's war games or whatever, right?
I think GoldenEye is the I am invincible.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, GoldenEye.
I sometimes say that when I do something, but that I think is really amazing,
Josh, I'm right.
and then I'll be like,
Josh's
I'm
right.
invincible.
Why is Joff? Why are you right?
Why is War Games the most
Most influential movie, hacker movie of all time?
Influential in what way? Hold on, before Joff answers.
On the hacker world.
In terms of what? Influencing people to become hackers?
No,
I'm right. Can I
am Dimitri. Dimitri's got it. Dimitri got it in Discord. Yes. So
I can answer the question because President Reagan reacted to the movie and actually changed policy based
even
on
better.
War Games.
Even better. Congress watched 4 minutes and some odd seconds of War Games and passed CFAA because of it.
Mm.
Yeah. It's very
it's in the constitutional.
What you're implying is that CFAA has impacted the community more than anything else. That I would debate.
So what you're saying is a movie with pre-coked out Ali Sheedy was the most influential hacker movie.
The most influential movie on the hacker world. And I'm absolutely right, Jeff. You can't argue it. I'm sorry. End of story.
I think
actually,
it pushed
Ferris Bueller was sort of the same character. He was a hacker too.
I think War Game pushed the hacker mentality, the Hollywood hacker mentality, into mainstream audiences. So it was one of the first times that like average people were seeing things that were in sort of a different realm.
I interviewed Casey Ellis for one of the Hacker Heroes episodes today to give everyone kind of a preview, and we talked about this, and I won't spoil it for what movie was his favorite hacker movie, but we did talk about a common theme that I thought was interesting in the most popular, or ones that hacker movies that we like the best, right, that we're talking about, in that the commonality they have is that the hacker is the hero. The hackers or hacker in the movies are the hero. There might be hackers that are the bad hackers, people, the bad hackers, but like the heroes in those movies are the good hackers.
Yeah.
Which I thought was kind of an interesting thing that I never thought about in all of the films that we're mentioning right now, Matrix included, right?
Yeah.
The hackers are the heroes, which I think is really, really cool. And influenced, I think, our culture in a positive way, which is kind of interesting. You guys want to do one more silly story?
One more, and then we should wrap.
All right.
up.
Do you want to talk about Dr. Magic Flute, or
we've got to talk about
or
Magic Flute.
5 cannabis jobs you never knew existed, or you just can't choose, so we have to do both?
I think it's Dr. Magic Flute.
Dr. Magic Flute was arrested after claiming he could cure women's cancer by having sex with them. I mean, you talk about social engineering used for like the most evil purpose. Like, you can just imagine the social engineering that has to go into convincing people that this is true.
It's just an old scam. I mean, people have been doing that kind of stuff for years. I mean, it doesn't have to be sex even. It's just quack medicine, and they've been doing it forever. And
it's like the it reminds me of like the elixirs. A non-perverted example is
snake
like the
oil.
Elixirs, the snake oil, and the elixirs. Like, this will cure anything, and it was really just cocaine and heroin that was in the
And I mean, if you take enough cocaine and heroin, you're going, I feel a lot better.
Great.
My leg just fell off, but leprosy, hell, it's got
for
nothing
a
on
certain period of time, depending on how much you took, your problems went away, and that was the whole elixir scam.
And then you died, and then the doctor went, hey, I don't know what happened.
Right.
It's probably didn't take enough.
It's, we talk about good, like using your skills for good or evil. This is clearly, people that I think there are, obviously folks that we've looked at via news articles and whatever that were like, oh, that person's a hacker, but they totally use their skills to do evil.
And sick people will go for anything because they're so desperate, and so it makes it even double evil. It's like people are sick; they're going to die.
The documentary I watched on Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah,
very kind of similar, like social engineering for perverted reasons.
But there's tons of these things out there. I mean, I knew somebody who had cancer, and they tried all this stuff, and after they tried all the regular stuff, and the doctors are going, I think it's pretty bad. You might want to, and then they started paying all their money to all these people that were doing crazy things and injecting them with sheep urine and all kinds of stuff, and. And I mean, the guy was like, I spent $40,000 here, and then I flew over here to Mexico, and this guy's got all these endocrine glands, and they grind them up, and you drink, and he's like, but none of it worked, and he's like, and now I spent all my money, and I'm like,
right,
yeah. But
I also think now I'm destitute and I'm gonna die, right?
Right.
My real question about this article is who dubbed him Dr. Magic Flute?
Yeah,
that is the real question. Right? That is the essence here. Who?
I would have gone for Dr. Magic Bassoon, personally.
There you go. In other kind of squirrel stories, I think it's interesting because many of us know, like when you were in high school, for example, and you're just like, I think we all knew the person that was like the pothead. And I think a lot of those people that we knew from like high school,
you were the person,
or you were the pothead, maybe like in high school or college, and now some of those people are like,
I made $1 billion selling cannabis.
They're like cannabis entrepreneurs or working in the cannabis industry and doing really well because the tides have turned when it comes to cannabis. And so I thought it was entertaining to talk about this article that's dubbed High Aspirations, 5 Cannabis Jobs You Never Knew Existed. I'll cover one. It's called The Edibles Chef.
I love that concept.
You can... they work in a variety of capacities, from coming up with designer marijuana-infused drinks to whipping up cookies, crackers, cakes, and gummies. So this is like the person like did really well in culinary class in home economics in your school, but was also a pothead.
Major stoner,
is probably an edible chef today.
Well, so when Washington State first legalized marijuana, my friend Lou, who's also deceased, so I can talk about him. He was really excited about this because he was a major weed user back in the day, and he was a nice
a brilliant scientist. From
he was
one of the most brilliant scientists.
He was the smartest person I've ever known.
Yeah.
But he was a law-abiding citizen. He did not break the law, and he was like, "Can we go to Seattle and can buy weed?" And I was like, "All right, let's go." Sure. So we went to this really posh place, and it completely freaked me out. Because we went in there, it was like going in some kind of really elaborate wine store or a cigar shop. And we walked in, and they had this sort of like security person sizing us up.
Yep.
They're trying to read, are they gay, straight, or whatever. And they finally apparently decided we were straight, which was interesting. And sent these hot...
Did they get it wrong?
No, but it was like, I was like, it's me, I was like, I figured they would read this.
Two guys walking in.
It's a younger guy.
And you were holding hands with Lou.
Yeah, and I mean, the whole thing making out in front of the store and all that. But that was because we were stoned. But but we went in there, and this super hot person came over to me, and it was like a sommelier.
Totally is a thing. Totally a thing.
And Lou, they were like, what can we do for you? And Lou's like, we want to get high, and the guy's like, no, we don't do high here, sir. I was like, I'm wanting to know what kind of vibes are you looking for, and and they were going through all these strains and all this stuff, and I was like, this is so weird.
Yeah.
And the guy's like, now this strain has kind of a buzzy sort of high, but it's really mellow underneath, and Lou's just like, well, it gets you completely zonked in about 5 minutes. That's what I'm looking for, buddy. But I mean, it was really a weird experience because there's the same people you're talking about. Like, before they were like out on the street corner going, "Hey, I got what you need, man. I got what you need." Now they're in the store going, "I see. Let's look at some of these strains over here." Which
it's like the tides of turn.
It's like alcohol, right? Like you look at like prohibition and where we're at with like microbrews, with alcohol, with micro distilleries,
wine and whiskey. Tequila,
wine, whiskey, all those things, the smells, the taste, the aromas.
Absolutely.
Like you look at, like, there's a lot of science behind, cannabis and all the things that it does, like between decarboxylation and all of the different aspects of CBDA, THCA, all of the things that you're splitting from a molecular level, like scientifically.
But like also like botany, when we get into, cultivation of plants, and we talk about tobacco and cigars, right? Like I've studied that. Like it's an amazing art mixture of science. Kind of similar to what we do in hacking, right? It's that mixture of art and science applied to cigar tobacco plants, which despite, what you may believe is very different from cigarette tobacco and hookah tobacco, right? Those are all different large families, like
strains?
Not strains, but like the main families of plants are different between cigars, cigarettes, and hookah
pipes
and pipe tobacco, right? Like the main strains of plants are different. So once you dive into those various categories, like with cigars, there are some amazing people who balance that art and science to be able to grow and blend and cultivate these plants. The same thing now is translating into marijuana.
Yeah.
And it is, again, an art and a science all blended into one, which is something, as we all grew up, like, that was like, not a thing. It was illegal. It was horrible. There was the devil's lettuce.
You bought like a baggie full of old banana peels from some guy named Sid.
It was like, maybe it was oregano or maybe it was weed. But yeah, exactly.
My nephew is now a bud tender.
There you go. A bud tender.
Yes.
And he actually, I'm like, okay, so what kind of questions do you get? He goes, oh, blah, 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 blah. And he starts telling me these stories. I want to relax, but I don't want to get too paranoid.
I don't want munchies, or I want munchies. And there's people who have grown strains to have all these different properties that have different physical effects.
Lou was growing these plants, and he had a microscope.
Yeah.
I was like, what is a microscope for? And he's like, well, you have to look at the resin as it forms on these. And he had notebooks full of notes about like growing plants. They were really pretty. I mean,
it's crazy times.
Yeah.
High times?
High times.
That was a magazine, right?
It was. Had a centerfold and everything.
Yeah.
Like, whoa, look at
that, bud.
Yeah.
So,
on that note. Before we confess to any crimes.
If you're a bud tender and you work for someone named Bud, that makes you Bud's bud tender?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it does.
And there's the title for the show. Okay.
Bud's bud tender. That will conclude this episode of Paul's Security Weekly. Sven will be coming up next. I'm sorry. We're not concluding pre-recorded segment with Sven coming up next. Stay tuned.